Hi everybody, this
Hello
is
everyone.
the Art of Zenning cruise back with chapter 3. Hope everybody's doing well and looking forward to the joyous holiday season. Best wishes all of you. So continuing from our previous video, I think we left you guys with two tools. So we'll start with the quiz. Anybody wants to answer what they were? Oh, I guess we're the ones talking in this video. So the two tools we have left in the last two videos. First one was accepting everything as is. Which again we've gotten tons of mixed reactions and we're loving them all, and we talked about them in our last video. And I think Sandy left in the last video. The second one was start every morning with even a minute or two looking in the mirror, giving yourselves a hug and say I love myself, so that we're starting positively. And truly, as you love yourself is when you can then spread the love to all of us around us who we care about, and sometimes we think we don't care about, but at the end of the day we are all in this together. So spreading that love truly brings that positive vibes within us and around us and makes things a lot easier for us and truly enjoy life fully, which is what we're here for, to have a fulfilling experience.
And you know, the best thing about developing that attitude of loving your own self is that you stop judging yourself. And when you stop judging yourself, your judgment for others falls too, and you move towards leading a more balanced life. And by what I mean by a balanced life is, in life the best moments happen when there is a balance. That means, you know, when you're like totally joyful, that doesn't last for a long time. When you're totally stressed out, that doesn't last forever either. But there is a state of being that can last forever, where you are accepting the moment you are in, because that's the moment, that present moment is the only thing you got, and you move on from that point to whatever action is required or whatever is required to move on to the next moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think initially, as you mentioned, nothing that we call so-called, oh, I'm feeling good right now, I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad. Those are all 100% of the time for all of us impermanent. Those feelings come and go. They do not ever last. Or in other words, we are not those feelings. No matter what is happening around us, we let those things create that feeling into us, and then we attach to that feeling and that get carried away, and then life gets too difficult and we get the victim mentality at times, and then other times we're riding high because things are going so well for us. But I think that the key to remembering, and that's part of the acceptance model or tool, is that none of these feelings, A, we are not these feelings or emotions as we feel them, and B, they never last. So they are impermanent, and we who truly inside of us, the true us who is permanent, is just here to experience a whole plethora, a whole range of those feelings and emotions to enrich in ourselves. And we don't need to get attached to any of those feelings throughout the spectrum in order to make it meaningful.
You know, when the pendulum goes to one side, it comes back to the opposite side with equal zeal. So you know, that's why if we can have it somewhere in the middle, then that is where the balance comes from. We were reading the other day about a balance between wisdom and compassion. So a person who has a lot of wisdom but lacks compassion is not going to be able to lead a fulfilling life as much as a person who has a lot of compassion but has no wisdom about it.
Yeah, and truly the goal is to have a balance between wisdom and compassion, because that only leads to, as Sandy was saying, a pendulum swinging evenly in both directions. Otherwise, we would too much compassion without any wisdom turns us into an emotional mess sometimes, and too much wisdom, if you will, with no compassion, of course, also turns us on the opposite end of the spectrum into somebody who quote unquote could be very selfish, or just wouldn't eventually create any lasting happiness or fulfillment for themselves either.
So there is one thing that I wanted to mention is that we've talked, in the realm of spirituality, it's mentioned a lot that all of this world is a play, right? Like it is, whatever role we are playing is a role that has been assigned to us by our society, by our parents, by the situations, by our thought process, and we totally identify with that role. But if we can find a way to let go of that identification and create a balance between the human part of it, which is identified with form, to being, which is identified with our true existence, then we can develop that perfect balance of wisdom and compassion.
Right.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
and so wisdom and compassion balance the same thing as a balance between human and being. So to be a true human being, you want to have a strike, continue to strike the balance between human and being.
so at this point, I think I want to introduce a meditation technique which is very effective in creating that balance, in creating that. If we practice it, the key is that it needs to be practiced while you're involved in an activity. It needs to be practiced. If you're eating, go on eating. If you're, walking, go on walking. If you're doing stuff with your kids, go on doing whatever you are doing. But that meditation goes on inside of you, and that meditation is that while you're involved in your daily activities, stay focused on the pauses between your breath. So as your breath goes in, there's a pause, and when the breath goes out, before you begin that inhalation process, there is a pause. So if you can focus on that pause between the breath going in and going out while you're involved in activities in your daily life, what that creates is that creates a detachment from what's happening, that creates a separation. And that's when, all those, the role playing is happening at the periphery, but you're centered with your breath. And that ways you're able to see the duality of the human and the being, and the oneness of that human and being. And that experiment, I think, is that meditation technique goes a long way in developing your connection with your own self, right? Being aware of where you are. So if you're going to, say, Christmas dinner, and you're going to face a sibling where you have not had a great relationship with it, while you're interacting, if you can pause and you can focus on the pauses between your breath, you will not likely get upset by what is being said or what happens, because what you're going to do is you're going to stay centered with that, the your soul, the whole divine, the divine within you, and you are able to be the being you are. And you're also able to see how much of a play this is that's
Yeah,
going on around you.
absolutely. And remember, the goal of meditation is not to run away from the world. The goal of meditation, on the contrary, is to use it as a tool to live life more fully. And hence, in the examples of everyday life, we have to live our lives, and we should. That's what we are here for. But in order to live them in a very fulfilling way, the tools like meditation tools, which Sandy was explaining, is very, very helpful.
I always say this to my son, and sometimes he gets really annoyed by it. I tell him the most expensive real estate is in your mind. So be careful who gets that space. Be careful who occupies that real estate in your mind. And if you can be aware of not giving someone or something space in your mind, you're more likely to lead a more joyful and fulfilled life.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it that even if you decide to give the space, just know that you're leasing it out. I mean, you lease out the space, and then you get it back all the time, because you are never completely selling the space, because that's when we get completely attached and create issues for ourselves.
Yeah. So it's never a total transfer. It's just
Yeah.
it's a
We're talking like
temporary
realtors now.
contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's totally a temporary contract which can expire at your own will, and that's what you need to work at.
Right. And so try that meditation tool, please. And again, it's not, it doesn't, there's many kinds of meditations, but the goal always is to use them as tools to center ourselves, so that in the midst of the storm of life, you are always unflappable. And and that is one tool. And a lot of people have different ways of meditations, which we'll talk about more as well, like where you kind of have a more regimented time for meditation on a daily basis, things like that. But this one is actually you're meditating throughout the day as you're going about your activities, because you have more internal control as opposed to giving up the control to the activities and the people around you.
So you guys continue with giving yourself a lot of love. When you get up in the morning, give yourself a lot of love. Plan your day that I'm going to accept what goes on, and as you go on through your day, breathe in, pause, breathe out, and be aware of your breath while you engage in activities, and be really, really aware of your breath when you engage in an activities that is really stressful.
Fantastic. Happy holidays again, folks. Have a wonderfully joyous holiday season.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Take
Thank
care.
you.